Hello and welcome to DTV. I'm Michael Davis and I'll be your host for today's segment on DTV about face-to-face visitation in the Knox County jails. And here with me today is Tex Pasley, who is a staff attorney and fellow with the No Exceptions organization, and also Rebecca Parr with Knoxville's Next Step initiative. And we'll be talking with them today about the removal of face-to-face visitation from the Knox County Detention Facility. So, Tex, Rebecca, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right. So tell us a little bit about what has happened. What do we mean when we say that face-to-face visitation has been removed from Knox County jails?
So quite simply, since April 2014, all face-to-face visits have been banned within the Knox County jail system. So that includes the largest facility, the Knox County Detention Facility, but also the Work Release Center and the downtown Knox County Jail. And in place of face-to-face visits, the county has installed a video visitation system where people can either go to the detention facility to use a kiosk or do a remote call. And in both cases, what they're doing is similar to a Skype call, where they do a remote video call with the person who's inside.
Okay. Is the community aware of this?
So it was made public at the time, but a lot of people I talk to who don't experience this directly are unaware that this is the case. It was a policy that was put in place by the sheriff. It wasn't passed or approved in any way by the county commission. So it's just an internal policy that the sheriff, within his discretion, has instituted at the local jail.
Okay. And this is something that is within the sheriff's authority to do, or was this something that was required to have approval by the county commission?
So there's no need to have approval by the county commission. The sheriff largely has been delegated control over the day-to-day operations of the jail, but there is a contract with the company that actually installed the video call system and operates it, that has to be approved by the county commission. So the most recent one was approved at the end of 2014.
Okay. And so your organization, which is called Face Knox,
Yes.
Is designed to bring face-to-face visitation back.
Right. So there's really two goals. The first is bringing back face-to-face visitation. And then I mentioned the contract, but with the remote, so it's technically free if you go in person to use the kiosk, but if you use a remote video call, that costs $6 for a 30-minute call, and it's a flat fee, so it's not a permanent rate. And of that $6, 50% goes directly to the county's general revenue fund, and 50% goes to pay the private company Securus under the contract.
Okay, so we have this contractor called Securus, and they're the ones providing the actual telecom service.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, and the county, and one thing that's important to note is that the county did not pay anything to install that system. So the full cost has been borne by Securus, but the county's getting what's essentially extra money off the top, 50% on each video call.
Okay.
That really isn't recovering any costs. It's just going into the general revenue fund, just like any other tax that they might collect.
Okay. So, in a sense, the sheriff's department isn't getting these funds deposited with them. This is going into the general fund. So this is kind of almost a new revenue stream for the county. But where's this money coming from? Who's paying this?
So it's coming from the people who are trying to visit their friends and family in jail. And it's the way, and something important to understand is that a jail is different than a prison. In a prison, what that is, everyone who's imprisoned has been convicted of a crime. But in a jail, anyone who's arrested on the street will spend time in jail while they're awaiting, so they have to be held on a charge, but while they're awaiting their trial, they stay in jail, or you can pay bail and you can get out of jail. So typically, what happens is anyone who's in jail for a long period of time cannot afford bail.
Mm-hmm.
So these are people, someone who's in jail generally doesn't have the financial resources, number one, to make bail, or number two, to pay for these extra services.
Right. Okay. So along that line, do you have information on the kind of the demographics, I guess, of the people that are using this secure system and this video call sort of system the most in Knox County jails?
I don't know if we have any specific demographics. There's not much data that's really been collected on the use of the system. Securus is a privately held company, so they don't have to provide their records. And the sheriff, to be frank, has not done a great job of really tracking data on the use of the system, or they haven't been very forthcoming in providing it.
All right. So, what are the problems with this? I mean, what harm is this doing? What were the real benefits of a face-to-face visit anyway? Rebecca, I understand that you may have some commentary on this.
Absolutely. I have a nephew who's in the jail system right now, and I decided, okay, I need to go see him to see what this is about. And it was very uncomfortable. You're sitting in a small room with kiosks there, and you're trying to have an intimate conversation of sorts. You're not able to make eye contact. The camera is up here, so you're able to see their face, but you're not able to see their lips move in real time. So it's kind of still frame. And you're holding the phone. That's not so bad. We're used to that in visiting in different jails and prisons, but the disconnect is there. And I was looking at some of the policy that actually Knox County Jails has, and one of the things they talk about in their letter writing policy, but just making connections with family. And one of the things that I think about most often is that right now my nephew is in a very good place in terms of clear thinking and sobriety, and he's had time to reflect. And this is a time when he can make some of those connections and make better choices in judgment. And this is a time that he could be building and rebuilding some of those relationships. And that's true for many of the inmates, and they're not having the opportunity. And it led me to think about, well, what are we looking at when we have people in jails? Are we looking at ways that we're going to help them to become better citizens and reintegrate with society? And if we are, this is not helping. This is takes away from some of that. Or are we just incarcerating? And I understand this is just a jail, kind of a segue, but even more of an opportunity for them to look into ways of reconnecting with family and finding those opportunities. It's very difficult.
Right.
I also know that if you pay for a call from your home, if the call gets dropped, you don't get reimbursed for that money. That's it. That's
really?
Yeah.
So they're counting like from when that clock stops to when that clock ends on that 30 minutes.
Yeah.
No matter how much actual talking, actual interactive connection time is there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and there's even just emails are 40 cents, and oftentimes they won't go through. And so we're punishing families, because if you have children or if you have somebody who wants to come see you, it comes out of their pocket. It's not put on the burden of the prisoner. So we're not punishing them. We're punishing families. And if your loved ones are there, and this is, like I said, this is the time where they can reconnect. Why are we not making a greater effort to bring them back into society?
Right. Okay. So, what are some of the other things that we're hearing from inmates, former inmates, and family about some of these issues, these connection issues, the use of either the interactivity of the program, how easy or accessible it is to use this?
Yeah, I mean, to Rebecca's point, I was actually just speaking with someone yesterday who was trying to do a remote call and spent 30 minutes trying to get through and couldn't. And apparently the person on the other end was trying to do the same thing. And so now she has to file a request to get her money back, basically. And so I think this is what Rebecca's talking about is very common, I think. and there's not, it doesn't seem like the technology works that well. It's often spotty, and I think what's important to understand is that I think people can intuitively recognize that even if you're talking through a plexiglass screen, so if there was a screen between us, that's still much better than working with a glitchy system where you're looking up into the corner of the screen. And there's research that confirms this, but I think we all know.
I was going to ask if anybody had studied what quality of communication and interaction metrics do we have about communicating with someone, whether it's on the other side of a glass, as long as it's in person, versus this distant sort of electronic form of communication.
Yeah, there's been this jail visitation situation specifically is a very new phenomenon, so there hasn't been much study on that environment, but there have been studies that have shown that, for example, it's harder to build trust with someone through a video call than it would be talking face to face like we are now, to build empathy, to build a connection, and we keep on coming back to that word, that connection, and that's that's not just something we experience, but that's been documented through psychological research.
Right. So at this point, is there anyone that can communicate face to face with an inmate at the detention facility?
So attorneys still have the right to speak with their clients face to face, and there's a very small exception where a judge can order, if someone has been convicted and will be sent to prison at a facility far away, a judge can order one in-person visit before someone leaves. But that's obviously
that's sort of the end of a very long process at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this would obviously count spouses, other family, children, extended family, friends, pastors. What about therapists, counselors of other sorts?
So I believe clergy, in theory, have an exception. I've spoken with some who have had a hard time, some pastors who have had a hard time getting in.
Right. Okay.
But other than that, you're correct with everyone else you listed. There's no protections. Really.
Okay. So I guess this leads us to a big question. What was the reason to put this in? Why did this happen?
So at the time, one of the primary reasons that the sheriff's office gave was that it would reduce the flow of contraband into the jail, which on its face didn't really make a lot of sense because, as I mentioned, previously people had face-to-face visits, but they were separated through a plexiglass screen.
Okay.
So there wasn't any, it was called non-contact visitation.
And keeping, just for the sake of our viewers, I think most people have probably watched a few movies or TV shows where they see this happen. Right. And this is kind of what most people expect a jail visitation to be like. Although, sometimes you see depictions of people meeting face to face at a table with no contact or anything, like no touching sort of thing. But then what the policy was here before this was it was pure plexiglass window, no openings in the window, and just talking through either a kind of a speaker in the glass or on a telephone receiver, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So no opportunity to
hand anything,
pass anything back and forth, make any physical contact at all.
Right. And so contraband was one of the big selling points, I guess you could say. And with respect to that, we actually collected open records data going back to April of 2011, which is 3 years before the ban. Basically asking for monthly totals of the amount of reported contraband cases. And what we found is that from 2011 until late 2017, there was really no significant change on a monthly basis. So it seems pretty clear from that data that the installation of the video visitation system didn't really impact the amount of contraband that's coming into the jail.
All right.
So that's one reason. They vaguely mentioned safety, that the in-person visitation situation was crowded, especially on Saturdays, that it was a burden on staff.
Okay.
And that we're looking into to verifying those claims, I guess, and I think it's probably true that it has maybe reduced those burdens somewhat. But I think something important to recognize is we're not against video visitation itself. We're against the installation of video visits alongside the banning of in-person visits. We think people should have the choice.
Okay.
And we think remote video calls can be beneficial to people who, for whatever reason, can't make it out to the facility.
Okay. So we talked a lot on about what it's like for this interface, this service for people that are family members on the outside. What about the people on the inside? What are they using? Like, what is the physical interface of it, or the process for them?
So the jail's organized into pods, and there's kind of a central common area, I guess you could say. So the kiosks are arranged in the middle of that pod.
Okay.
And there's not, and I don't know if Rebecca can speak to it more.
A little bit. It was very distracting. My nephew, I could see him. Like I said, you cannot see their lips move in real time. It's like a still frame that's jumping.
Right.
But you're seeing people move behind them. Excuse me. And so the visit itself is very disjointed. You're able to hear in real time, and that's the only benefit to it. And because I love my nephew, and I've been through a lot of different prison visits in my life, from the time I was a child through my adult life. It was the hardest visit I ever had, but I still made him give me my little kiss goodbye, even though he's an adult. But I realized that for young people particularly, this is a really harsh punishment, meaning if you're going to visit a parent or a grandparent, that this is really kind of a really harsh way to visit, because you're not able to make the eye contact. And eye contact does everything when you're connecting with people.
Right.
Just even in our conversation here, could you imagine if we had to do that the whole time? There's a disconnect. I mean, we still hear one another's words, but the interpersonal is not there. So it was the most difficult visit, and I could see him being distracted by people all around. I didn't ask him a whole lot because it's a short time. You're only allotted a half hour, and so we utilized that time for family and connection time, and did the best we could with that. But I don't think it's the best for them either, and I can't speak on behalf of him, but I could say that it sure did feel disconnected for him too.
And so they have kiosks that, excuse me, they're in the middle of the pod. What is this automatically makes me ask, what level of privacy do they have for these sorts of calls that, in such a situation would likely involve some very personal conversations? You have real things going on in people's lives outside of those walls that they need to keep track of, that they need to discuss. Do we have any indication about that aspect of what it's like for them with having personal conversations in what may be a very private setting?
I know from my standpoint, where I was, it's a very small room that you go into. Immediately there's your sergeant or your police officer who's checking you in with a desk, and maybe 2 to 3 feet from him are the kiosk that you call from, or that the video calls go through, and they are directly right next to each other, as close as we are here.
Is there a divider?
No, there's not a divider.
Just screen.
I'm trying to remember. It's like a little monitor screen. I don't remember if there's a small divider or not, but you're right next to them on a little tiny stool, and so you're really right up next to each other. And I think there were maybe 4 or 5 on one side, and then maybe 6, 7, or 8 on the other side. I didn't happen to get the one that has a small cord, but my sister said she was assigned one of them and got the small cord. So even equipment is like it's not conducive to having any comforts. It's almost the antithesis. You are made to feel as uncomfortable as you possibly can during this visit, and there is no personal space.
Yeah. So are you on a receiver, or is there a speaker attached, or
No,
what?
it's an actual handheld phone with a cord that's attached.
And on the other end are the inmates? Are they on a receiver, or?
I believe they're holding the same thing, a handheld phone thing. And the camera is above, so you can never actually see into their eyes.
Okay.
If you want to see them, you're looking at the screen. You're not able to make any eye contact that way. And like I said, it's a still picture of them.
Yeah.
That's not in real time.
And so I understand that there are also an option to have is it like an iPad or something for the inmates that are there?
Right, there is, and those are provided also by Securus, and I don't remember exactly how it works. I think there's free use of that for a certain amount of time each day, and then someone, if not the inmate, then a family member can purchase additional time on that tablet. And so that's also provided by Securus, so that can be an option for more privacy.
For a fee?
For a fee, basically.
Okay. And are there any issues with that we know of? Or that part of the process?
I don't know of any specific issues. I think, I think like with the video calls themselves, conceptually, I think it's good to provide that service. I think the question we just need to be asking is to whose benefit that service is really being provided.
So we have any early indications with this lack of personal contact with inmates and their families? Any early indications of any problems that is causing?
I don't know. I know there was one point I looked over a statistic, and I know that there was, I don't know if it was increased violence, but there certainly wasn't less violence going on around this issue. I would imagine that it would lead to a lot of frustrations if you are trying to have a visit with your family member and you never can actually get through because this call happens, that would increase agitation on the prisoners, and I would assume. I know I'm not a prisoner, so I don't know. I know that on this end, how frustrating it is just trying to communicate the things that you have to communicate. Say you're trying to communicate with a loved one or even a client. In our case with Next Step, we have clients in the prison, and you're trying to work out some of the legal aspects and what their wishes are and how do we get this information to them. It's limited what you're able to transmit in that time. And it's not like they can have a pen and paper to write things down. Even when you're doing the email, there's a charge per email, and oftentimes they won't go through. They have to go through screening, and who knows what the determination is as to why they're screening out certain emails. You know, it's just, there's not a lot of transparency as well with this on the end of what the prisoners are receiving and able to receive, and how they're able to get as much help as possible.
Yeah, I'm seeing this this raises an issue here, the transparency and the choice issue of when something that has been there for so long that most people expect to have is taken away with very, very few exceptions. It's got to cause some issues. So what is being done about this? What is going on with Face Knox in an attempt to change this?
So Face Knox is a group of community leaders, community activists, affected individuals who are coming together to pressure the sheriff specifically, but any elected official who has control over this to do something about it, to very simply bring back in-person visits. And so Face to Face is really an outgrowth of another campaign that's called the Knox County Incarceration Collective, and now Knox County Unchained, but was really the initial community response to this policy. So they organized in 2014, and since I came on at No Exceptions, I've worked with some of those organizers, and Face to Face Knox now is the organization that's supporting this.
Okay. All right, so what have you done already? What's taken place already to put to kind of influence the sheriff to make a policy change here?
So I met with a few folks in the sheriff's office last fall to talk about this. Didn't get very far. So we did the open records request I mentioned. We compiled that in a report, which, among other things, in addition to the contraband data, has shown that the county has made $70,000 from the video call system since it was instituted in 2014. And has shown that in general, some of the safety numbers, the assaults at the jail, have been increasing since the system went into place. So we published that report last January, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that. And as some people may know, the current sheriff, Jimmy Jones, is term limited, and there will be a new sheriff elected in the Republican primary. There's two men who are running, Lee Trammell and Tom Spangler, both as Republicans, and whoever wins the primary will be the next sheriff.
Right.
So we're focusing, given the impending change, we focused a lot on working with both Mr. Trammell and Mr. Spangler to kind of understand our point of view, understand really how the community feels about this, and try to get the policy changed within the sheriff's office, because he's an elected official and he holds he holds a lot of authority within the jail.
And with the rally that took place in front of the city-county building just a month or so ago, there were almost 100 people there at that, if I'm understanding correctly. It would indicate that the community is taking some notice of this and does have an opinion on this and should be relevant to that sheriff's race.
Absolutely. Yeah. We had a rally with about 100 people. I think this is something that cuts across class and race. Really, when I talk to people about it, I think people really understand this at a gut level, that this is something that doesn't make sense as a policy.
On a personal note, I grew up in a family that my father, he served in prison. So I did a lot of prison visits as a kid at 11 years old, and so I've run the gamut of the different types of visits. There's an emotional component that we're not addressing here, and these are lives, these are humans, these are people, and we talk about them as prisoners, and we talk about them as the incarcerated, but these are people. And you mentioned the money, the $70,000. I'd be really curious to see how much of that is going back into helping with providing programming for these prisoners. How much is going into bringing in even addiction recovery options, and what can it all go back in if that's the issue? If we're going to maintain this policy of not letting people have connection, can we then use that money towards making better efforts at helping them?
In the brief time that we've got left, real quickly, how can somebody that's interested in your organizations get in touch with you if they want to help work on this problem?
Sure. So if you want to learn more about Face Knox, we have a Facebook page. It's just Face Knox or at F2F Knox. And then I work with No Exceptions Prison Collective. You can find us on Facebook or at noexceptions.net.
And Rebecca, real quickly.
Yeah, Next Step Initiative, we work primarily with advocacy for recovery.
And how can they get in touch with you?
Facebook, it's the best place. Next Step Initiative.
Well, thanks very much. I'm Michael Davis. This is DTV, and we've had with us Tex Pasley and Rebecca Parr. Thanks for watching.